But I think the approach that you made on really triggering that one moment in time when somebody needs that information, it's almost as if, let's say, you're thinking I should Google this, but it's already there. Well, in the future, it's probably going to be I should ChatGPT it or GPT it, and then it's already there. Yeah.
That's exactly right. And if you think about similar patterns, when we think about websites, we know someone going to a web page, they'll wait 2, maybe 3 seconds for the web page to load. If a web page starts taking more than 4 or 5 seconds, and certainly by about 7 seconds, you've lost the person. They give up. You think, well, it's just a few seconds, but in this world today, even the world I was in 20 years ago when we were starting to use web browsers, over 20 years, we didn't like to wait. And we have this timeout function. To your point, you've got all your notes in that electronic notebook.
Let me invite you to sit back, drop your jaw, tongue, and shoulders, take a deep breath, and if you wish, close your eyes for a moment and feel the beat within. In a few seconds, you just jumped from your head to your heart and felt the beat within, opening up to receive even more value and fulfillment out of your business and life. And today's episode. I'm your host, Nico van der Venne, confidant to successful CEO founders, entrepreneurs striving to achieve everlasting fulfillment. Welcome to the Everlasting Podcast with our next guest, Mark Herschberg. Introduction of Mark. We got a gold man here. Wow. Seasoned executive and cybersecurity expert who can bridge the divide between business and technology. Mark started, grown, and fixed startup companies spanning over a dozen different verticals, helped 2 Fortune 500 companies with their internal startup initiatives, and helped create educational programs at MIT and HBS. Mark typically lead, engineer, product and data science, and co-created strategy for the company. An experienced board member as well, and has created his own app out of, can I say frustration, Mark?
Sure. It began with frustration and seeing a need.
Okay, then I'll mention frustration. To find a way on a different approach to keep what you learned and use what you learned. In addition, and I thought this would be the end of the introduction, he also wrote a book on leadership, especially on a career tool for evolving in your career as a leader. That's one hell of an introduction, Mark. Welcome to the show, and thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to be here.
So let's dive into that app. We already talked about it a little bit in the green room, but it's amazing what that's a good solution, I think.
Sure. So let me set the context of the problem and then how I went and solved it.
Yes.
I read lots of books. I also listen to a lot of podcasts. The problem is every time I read a book, a business book, a self-help type book, say, wow, there's great advice here. And then I forget all 2 weeks later. When you listen to a podcast, you're probably at the gym, going to work, making dinner, doing something else, and it goes in one ear and quickly out the other because you're going to forget it before you can apply what you've learned. That's wildly inefficient. Think about all the hours we spent learning that went nowhere. And for the content creators, we care. It's not just about money. We care about helping you retain it. Although we do like you to remember us and word of mouth marketing and buying other products or services. I don't have any related to my book, by the way, but many people do. And so I wanted to find a way to help people better retain and use what they had, especially now that I was an author with a book. How do I help people remember it? I was convinced there must be a tool to do this, and I found none. There's lots of ways to market. There's social media. There's, oh, look at me posting, but it's not helping you. So what I realized from my years of teaching, I've been teaching for over 20 years at MIT. I helped to start a program at HBS as well. I've done other types of teaching. We know spaced repetition works. That's a fancy name for seeing the material again. And in school, you had tests. So you studied, you made flashcards. We'd put in the time. As an adult, there's no test. So you're not taking notes. You're not going to create these flashcards and look over and over. For those who do take notes on books, because I actually would take notes on mine, you never go back and look at them. That was the problem. It's not the taking of the notes, it's the accessing of the notes. So how can we give you that access easily? And that's where Brain Bump comes in. It's a completely free app on the Android and iPhone stores. What we do is we take the key ideas from books, blogs, podcasts, classes, and talks. If it's a book, imagine going through with a highlighter. Oh, well, remember this. Here's a good quote. Here's a good point. We take all those highlights, we put them into the app, and then they're all in the app tagged by topic. Here's the advice on leadership. Here's the advice on networking. Here's the advice on communicating. So now you can use it one of two ways. There's a just-in-time feature. My book, for example, there's a chapter on networking. Where do you read it? Sitting at home. Where do you need it? 2 months later, as you're going into a conference. So imagine as you're in the lobby of the hotel, you open the app, you tap networking, and there's all the networking tips right there within seconds, just when you need them. Or maybe if you want a subset, you created some favorites because we have a favorites list. That's the just-in-time feature. There's also a daily affirmation feature. Imagine you're trying to scale up your business. So you've been listening to podcasts like this, or you're reading books on scaling. Imagine if every day at 9 a.m. as you go to the office, there's some advice. You don't even open the app, it just pops up on your phone. Here is advice on scaling. You look, 2 seconds later, you swipe, you're done. Once a week, maybe 3 p.m. is your strategy meeting. So get a strategy tip at 2:55 p.m. right before the meeting. So you're primed for it. And then maybe you're a new parent, so you're reading a parenting book. You get that at 6 o'clock, right? As you leave the office, walk home, there's that parenting tip. And the key idea is that it's always relevant to when and where you are. Because the parenting advice at 11 a.m., your brain says, good advice, but not now, I'm busy. That strategy advice, if you get Friday afternoon, your brain says, I need this Wednesday, I'm not going to remember it for next Wednesday. So you control when and where you get information. This is the key. We move from push media, which is the email marketing, social media, even blogs, podcasts, and emails. They come out on the schedule set by the content creator. But now we give you control to say, I need this information at this time. And that's the key to learning, retaining, and using all the information you get.
That's a great approach. I can imagine a couple of scenarios in either my own life or in the organization I'm currently running a long time project in, to maybe even prepare people for trainings that are upcoming. For instance, you give them a snippet of information that can trigger them to already think about the subject that might come up, or like you said, right in front of that key meeting one-on-one with your manager, so you can put in a good one to convince them of your high intelligence and all of that wonderful stuff, or just really being practical and thinking a little bit further than just reading the book, and indeed taking out a couple of things. Because the moment you said taking notes and never going back to them, luckily this camera only has a limited view, but there's I have these kind of black book notebooks, and the funny thing is I also have something that's a completely modern solution. It's a Remarkable, so it's one of those writing tablets, and this is full of all notes and stuff like that from trainings, from meetings, and of course usually notes from meetings you kind of still pick up because you wrote something down on your to-do list, or you want to send somebody some work, or delegate something. But I think the approach that you made on really triggering that one moment in time when somebody needs that information, it's almost as if, let's say you're thinking I should Google this, but it's already there. Well,
That's
in the future, it's
exactly
probably going to be I should chat GPT it or GPT it, and then it's already there. Yeah.
That's exactly right. And if you think about similar patterns, when you think about websites, We know someone going to a web page, they'll wait 2, maybe 3 seconds for the web page to load. If a web page starts taking more than 4 or 5 seconds, and certainly by about 7 seconds, you've lost the person. They give up. You think,
Mhm.
well, it's just a few seconds, but in this world today, even the world I was in 20 years ago when we were starting to use web browsers, a little over 20 years, we didn't like to wait. And we have this timeout function. To your point, you've got all your notes in that electronic notebook, and I'm sure that's accessible through your phone and other interfaces. So in theory, you always have it with you. But
Mhm.
if we're in a conversation or you're running off somewhere and you're thinking, I need this information, it's going to take you minimum 20 or 30 seconds to access it, to
Yeah.
open up the right files, to control F and search through it. And you're going to give up the same way we give up on the website. So the key, and again, there's lots of other apps that let you take notes. The key was making the information accessible as quickly as possible. We focus on how many seconds and how many clicks it takes to get the information, and we're always trying to minimize that.
Well, that's an approach that I've never heard of, and find it kind of a pity that I only hear about your app right now. But I also hear you correctly that this is an app that's just available right away? People can download it right now.
Right now, it is 100% free on both app stores or at brainbumpapp.com. But if you go to download, you have to come back and promise to listen to the rest of this episode. Don't want you to leave the
Yeah,
episode. But
yeah,
you
yeah.
can go to
Keep your phone there. Absolutely.
brainbumpapp.com,
Uh-huh.
download the free app. And now the best part is we have thousands of tips already from lots of books, blogs, podcasts. We've already put that in there. So you don't even have to create them. You get them. Now, obviously, we don't have all the books and other content in the
Yeah,
world.
yeah,
So if
yeah.
we don't yet have what you want, there's two things you can do is one, tell us who you want and we'll reach out to the person, or even better, tell the person and say, you should get your stuff here because I want to access it. But you can also add it yourself just for you. Now, we respect copyright and IP. So we're
Mhm,
never going to take someone's content without their permission. But if
mhm,
you locally want to take your own notes just for your instance of the app, you can go do that. You can add it yourself. You can also, if you've been doing highlights in your Kindle ebooks, you can import that highlights file and now they all turn into tip cards for you. But we'll reach out to the content creator, the author, the podcaster, and say, please put your tips here for everyone.
mhm.
And we love to get more content. The more we get, the more people love it. The more people love it, the more content creators come, and it's just a better experience for everyone.
Yeah, indeed. Now this is something enormously valuable. Um, where do you come up creating an app? Well, first, of course, you think of I want a solution for myself, but then launching it into the world, you're giving something extremely valuable into the world where most companies, start looking at what's the revenue bit that we can get out of so many sold items in this app and blah, 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 blah. Where do you come from that point of view? Because this is, the world is not free. We all know that. The only thing that comes up is the sun. You don't have to pay for that or anything, and storms. But but what's the story there?
Well, this app I am trying to give away for free. We plan to keep it for free for everyone. This is, you could describe it as charity. You can describe it as just my way of giving back to the world. This is how I want to make the world better. And now I'll note, but we'll circle back to your idea in a moment. I mentioned earlier, most authors, for example, usually have some other service. And by the way,
Mhm,
authors don't make money from selling books. They make nothing,
mhm,
but the book helps promote them for their coaching, their consulting, whatever other services or expertise.
mhm,
And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that business model. Because I build tech startups, I work as a CTO, CPO, and because this book is on careers, this is all just how can I give it away and help as many people as possible. Now, the book we have to charge something for, partially there's printing costs, but also if you give away a book for free, people go, okay, it's cheap, it's not worth it.
mhm,
Apps, however, they're used to getting for free. Now, that said, many of my other companies, we would start off with a product that is free. In fact, one I'm in the process of launching now. We're looking at how do we give away for free or for some trivial costs like $1 a year to
Mhm.
get people on it. And profits do matter, certainly for those companies which are designed to make money. The mistake is to start out and say, how do I get money? Instead, focus on how do I create value? Because if you can create value for your customers, then you can claim some of that value down the road. It's kind of the drug technique of your first taste is free. If I just
Mm.
say, here's something, go buy it, well, I don't know, maybe it works, maybe not. In fact, I can tell you as a CTO, I have companies every day saying, oh, we've got this great tool, it's going to make your team so much more productive, and you can get a 2-week, a 1-month free trial. It's
Mhm.
not free. You might
Mhm.
not be charging me anything, but now I have to invest time and effort for myself and my team to do this, and I don't yet know if it's worth it. So if you
Mm.
can minimize that cost and say, here's something that truly is free, not just in terms of money, but in ease of use, time and effort, I can quickly get you to the value you receive. That's going to get people hooked. They're going to say, great, I need this. Once they're using it, so, oh, I see the value. You're saving me this much time. You're earning me this much money.
Uh-huh.
Now I say, okay, look, the world isn't free, as you point out. I need to be compensated for it. They'll say, well, I can now figure out how much I'm willing to pay because I can do this and I'm still getting a benefit. So start with the value creation before you get to value claiming.
That sentence is so profound because um, I've worked in the past where I was, of course, if you start a business, the first thing you think about is the freedom that you're going to get. That kind of disappears really quickly when you realize that you have to do everything. But, you know, and then the second thing, that was my cycle, is how am I going to earn my buck, my bread on the table and stuff like that. And I can agree 100% with what you're saying because marketing used to be something you had this shop in a village where you put something in, on the wall advertising. This is, I don't know, blacksmith. Everybody knew was okay. He's a blacksmith. I have to go there with my horse to get a shoes on and stuff like that. These days, with this high-tech world and international connection like we are now, I don't know what distance we're at right now, but you're in the US, I'm here in Belgium, in Europe, and speed connections are amazing, stuff like that. But this also causes the fact that you need to shout even louder to show yourself to this world. So one of the ways to do that, of course, is go on social media, which is only, I think, 15-20 years that exists in a certain form of way. um, and I see a lot of value going into social media. And my experience has been that I gave a lot of value and didn't get a lot of value back because I was directing my value towards the wrong target audience. That's something you have to be aware of as well. So if you look at your target audience with this specific app, or let's skip over to your book because I find the book very, very interesting as well. You just mentioned a little bit earlier. The book is written to help you. If I remember correctly, from I was listening at one of the episodes, another podcast that you, from like 20 years to 40, how you can climb the ladder, and have a couple of tips there. Is that correct? Where I'm going with this on your
That's
book?
that's the marketing copy. It turns out it's a little more broad. So when I first wrote it, I thought, well, who's the target? Because they tell you if you target everyone, you target no one.
True. Yeah.
I actually disagree with that advice. Now, the book is written for white collar office workers. It's
Okay.
maybe less useful if you're a plumber, if you're working as a cashier in a shop, but assuming you're an office worker, we were targeting 20 to 40, although on Amazon, most of the comments I get in the reviews are, boy, I wish I had this book 20 years ago. And we see
Oh.
a lot of people who are in their 40s and 50s writing about how much they like it. So I'd broaden the target, even though I think I initially list 20 to 40. And
Hmm.
really, it's the skills that everyone needs that we don't teach. And that's why the book with the subtitle, it's the career toolkit. And the
Uh-huh.
subtitle is Essential Skills for Success That No One Taught You. Now, this comes from partially my own experience when I was hiring people. I discovered no one seemed to have this skill or this
Mhm.
set of skills. But around the same time, MIT got feedback from companies saying, we try to hire people and we want these skills, but we can't find them. Not just MIT undergrads, not just engineers, not just recent college grads. Universally, these are the skills we want in all our hires, but no one seems to have them. And we looked
Wow.
around and said, right, no one's teaching them. That's why no one has them. So
Uh-huh.
we create a program, and this is where I got involved at MIT, and I've been teaching here for 20 plus years. What are these universal skills? How do we teach them? And from having done that now for decades at MIT, I said, well, I know it's not just our students who need this. And
Uh-huh.
that led to the book, How Can I Reach a Wider Audience and Help More People?
That's amazing. I can remember my own career, and I just skipped through a part of it. Just looked at the chapters and read the, let's say, the back cover and all that beautiful stuff that you get an idea of what the book is about. And I listened to the episode where you were explaining this part also for in a different context, but I'm thinking back when I started working. I ended my high school, and that was I didn't go into higher education or anything. It was just not a possibility within my family. And I've been out there for 25 years, and the last 5 years to 8 years I've had my company. And I must indeed say that there is no curricula or anything like it that brings up specific skills that are career oriented. It's the same way where nobody explains you how to do your taxes. It's like it's exactly the same. Nobody explains you when you're 18 or 19-year-olds, you start working, and 2 years later you get this letter or this email saying you can fill in your taxes. And you're sitting there, okay, now I need to read a book on how to fill in the taxes, and nobody explains it to me. With these days, you can find a lot of stuff on the internet, but how did you go from, so you explained MIT, you're educating there as well, but how did you go from MIT to using the book for? Do you use it for companies wide stories, or is it still specifically?
No, it's across different industries. And actually, let me
Okay,
give some context. We'll get a little more concrete about what's in the book, and then we'll talk
yeah,
about where it
yeah,
applies and how.
nice.
The book has 10 chapters, 10 skills. Now, you've seen these lists before, and you've seen it as a list of anywhere from 5 to 50. It's really
Mhm.
just the size of the buckets you're putting them in. So these aren't going to be surprises of, oh my God, I never heard these words before. But the 10 buckets I use, the 10 skills, chapter one, career planning. And so chapter one itself is career plan. Now, that might mean for some people, how do I move up the corporate ladder and get bigger titles? Even if you're a founder CEO, it's not about your title changing. It's how do you develop and evolve your set of skills to handle new challenges as your business grows.
Mhm.
Chapter two, working effectively, understanding corporate culture, understanding how you're delivering value to your customers, the ecosystem in which your business operates. We never tell people this. We say, you're a cog, sit over here, turn with the other cogs.
Mhm.
Chapter three is on interviewing, not as a candidate. We give people, oh, here's how to answer this question. But many of us have to hire people, and we've had zero training.
Yeah.
The analogy I use, it's like saying to a 16-year-old, hey, you've been in a car before. You know how it works. So here are the keys. Go drive off. Best of luck. That's what
Mhm.
we do. And it's like, oh, you've been in an interview before. Go hire some more people. So that's section one. Section two, there's a chapter on leadership, and then one on people management and one on process management. And then the third section, interpersonal dynamics, has 4 chapters: communication, networking, negotiation, and ethics. So, again, these are the 10 skills. These are universal skills. And in each chapter, there is a mental shift, how to look differently at the skill than what people typically do,
Mhm.
And then what are concrete, actionable things you can do to get better at this particular skill? And then it concludes with a summary and next steps to go further. And we, again, this applies across all different disciplines. We have examples in the book from different disciplines and how you can apply it to your job. And then, of course, all of this is also in the Brain Bump app. So you have the companion app and you have all these tips with you to help you
Yeah.
remember it and apply it when you need them.
Okay. Okay. Well, yeah, it's a nice combination right there. Yeah. So is there also a part you mentioned the second chapter, career planning, if I no, the first
Chapter one,
chapter,
career
career
planning.
planning, and then the second one was I can't remember.
Working effectively. And this is a bucket of
Yeah.
subtle skills like
Mhm.
managing your manager. They never teach us that, but
Yeah,
keeping
yeah,
your
that's good.
manager happy, really important. Understanding how you deliver value to the customer, understanding corporate culture, corporate politics. These
Mhm.
are the unwritten things you have to do to be successful. And most people don't even know they have to do this, let alone what it is they have to do.
Yeah, indeed. And I think one of those parts there is what you're saying, corporate culture, managing your manager. It goes both ways because there's a lot of stuff that goes on about leadership and how you need to manage people, etc., etc. But as the person getting, the delegated items towards you on the expectations that are not mentioned when you get the delegated item towards you, like I have a standard way of asking people something is usually either I know that they need deadlines or I don't give them deadlines because I know either they work too fast. It's kind of a way that you start learning in your leadership role. This person, you have to tell them next Monday afternoon, I need this ready. Another person, if you tell them next Monday afternoon, I need this ready, they get stressed out and they just, lock down and they're not able to do it. And those are skills that are pretty difficult to put down on paper. Are any of those tips also in there that you've out of your own experience, because you've certainly got a lot of experience on the road, let's say, that can help?
There's a whole bunch. You give one example of how you set deadlines for people. Another one I talk about is how we communicate. There are some managers where if I want to pitch you an idea, I need to go into your office, we need to sit down, I need to talk through it with you.
Hmm.
Whereas a different manager might say, email it to me, let me look it over, think about it, then we'll talk.
Yeah.
Both are perfectly acceptable, but the mistake we might make is if you go and email the first one that says, just talk to me face to face. I don't want more emails in my inbox. Or
Yeah.
you walk into the second one and she says, listen, like don't surprise me like this. Send it to me. I'll look at when I'm ready. And so
Mhm.
just aligning to the how, not the what, the
Yeah.
how. And this comes from the fact that in school, we were very clear about you're going to write 1,000-word essay on this Shakespeare play. Okay, you know exactly what format to deliver that in. You type it
Yeah.
out, double space, whatever the professor wants. Or here's a math equation, go solve it. Put your answer
Mhm.
in the box. Very clear how to deliver the answer. You just had to figure out the what. But in the real world, you don't get that clear how. And
Yeah.
so learning that, and by the way, if you're thinking, well, I'm already a manager, I'm the CEO, so I don't have to manage up. Yes, you do, because you have clients.
Yes.
And you have to do subtle things like some clients say, okay, call me as you hit that next milestone that we specified in the contract. And otherwise, I'll assume no news is good news. And then
Hmm.
there are other clients where you need to check in with them week after week, maybe even every day, just to hold their hand, just to keep them, just so they feel that transparency. That's usually not in a contract, the frequency of communications.
No, it's not.
But
Yeah.
any salesperson, account manager, or CEO knows you have to figure this out and then manage those expectations. And so these are the things never talked about in school, but they apply to all of us.
It's kind of funny how what you mentioned on if you were in school is it university, high school, middle school, wherever, somebody instructs you to do a certain task towards a certain date, and they even write it in your schedule or something like that, or you need to write it down or whatever. That's what I think. We're both kind of the same generation, if I can make the right assessment. But my kids now, they're 13 and 11 years old, and they get these assignments just dropped into a mailbox, and then they do get a deadline, which is kind of gray area of saying next week, where I'm like, these kids are not used to getting this leeway too much. And I've 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 gone into extremes where I always say you have to do it, then that's the deadline, that's what needs to be done, blah blah blah, with my kids. And I've noticed that they need a certain structure in their life at that age to understand what steps they need to incrementally take to achieve something. When you're saying like an essay of 1,000 words, it's a pretty big document to write. You won't write that in 1 hour. You might need to take some research time and this and that. And I've noticed that with younger people these days, and I'm really talking about what I call it, Generation Z. I don't know, one of those generation things. But I've noticed that there's a lot of tenacity or grit to do these little things, to, one after the other, to compile it, to compound it to a complete document. They leave it till the last moment, and then they start working on it. What's your view on this effect and towards the future? Because you've been in leadership roles as well. I have my own view, but what do you view on that?
So I agree with you on that. I think back to my fifth grade teacher who made us get day planner books,
Uh-huh.
and she would have us open and say, okay, we're going to have a test next Thursday. Everyone open your book, and next Thursday, write down test.
Uh-huh.
I think she'd even tell us things like write down 3 times between now and next Thursday, study for test.
Uh-huh.
And she helped us because at that age, we couldn't figure it out on our own, which is fine. We were 9
Mm-hmm.
and 10 years old. And so she would walk us through it. And of course, that taught us very good skills. And we took that into middle school and high school. And even
Mm-hmm.
today, and I know even my calendar today, I have activities. And sometimes I'll put days or weeks before, like, reminder, this is due, or work on this,
Yeah.
knowing that's coming up.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that's happened is there's a lot more there's a lot more that's been taken off the plates of
Mm.
kids. Now, you said you're referring to Gen Alpha. So at the time we're recording
Right.
in 2024, Gen Alpha are the kids who are in middle school, high school, college, even right out of college. Gen Z has, I believe, I don't know the exact years, but Gen Z at this point they're maybe finishing up college or out of college. And
Mm.
millennials, of course, are now, I think some of them are hitting 40 in 2024.
Okay.
But what we saw when I was a kid, when you were a kid, because I think we are about the same age,
Mm.
our parents would say, go outside and play, come
Mm-hmm.
home when it gets dark. And they had no idea where we were. And we
Mm-hmm.
had to manage our time. Where are we going? How do I make sure I am home by 6 o'clock for dinner? We weren't even wearing watches. So we had to somehow figure out the time. Maybe someone had a watch. Like, hey, what time is it? Okay, because I need to leave at this time. And
Mm-hmm.
we did a lot of self management. What we saw, at least here in the US, is when we moved to the millennials, to get into college, it wasn't just, well, you need to have good grades and maybe play a sport or an instrument. Suddenly you needed good grades and you had to speak another language and you had to be first chair in violin and you had to do some charity work. And so the parents started to overschedule the kids. There's a
Mm.
term helicopter parenting of parents who would come in whenever there's a problem. Another term was snowplow parenting. The parents would just push away anything in the way of their kids.
Mm.
And so now the kids weren't making their own choices. The executive function of, do I want to do soccer or violin? Maybe I don't want to do both of them because my afternoons are too busy, taken away from the kids. And the parents are saying, this is what you're doing. Your job is to be that cog and do it. And
Mm-hmm.
so we removed that training. And now, to your point, automation is great, but when automation puts everything into your calendar, as is happening with your kids, they're not making the decisions. They're not saying, I need to put this here and then I need to think about what else happens. They just say, oh, it magically shows up. I just have to follow what my calendar tells me. And they're giving up that executive function thinking. So we do need to bring that training back in, formally and informally, to the younger generations and their education.
Yeah, I completely agree. Even now, with the newest buzz of AI and so on, you see these stories come up where they tell you, get this app and it'll schedule everything for you and this and that. I was kind of apprehensive. I I love AI. I use it a lot, because I'm a tech guy as well. I worked 15 years in IT, so for us it's like second nature to start up something new and say, "Oh, this works," or "Let's try this," and try to break it usually. But anyway, but I think it also has its merits, of course, to aid us in scheduling and prioritizing and all that beautiful beautiful stuff. But I'm a bit apprehensive towards giving it to my kids already for that. I usually a couple of weeks back, my youngest one came in, Dad, I need to write a poem. And I'm like, I used to write poems when I was really young, especially when I had girlfriends. Of course, these things come easy. But and I was thinking, how is he going to write a poem? So he explained to me he needed to get a book from the library and then write a poem about it. And I asked him the question, okay, how are you going to approach this? Because this is something completely new. And he really was struggling to find a way on how can I work towards that poem. And I said, that's the end result. So come back. Let's get back to the first step. What happens before the poem? Oh, I need to read the book. I said, well, that was easy, wasn't it? What do you need to do before that? Oh, I need to go to the library. I'm like, today the library is open. Hint. So he went off, and then he came back. And the funny thing was, he came into the library, and he talked to the librarian, and he said exactly what he needed to do for school. So he had to explain about the poem and this and that. And she gave him a book with a beautiful story, and at the end of the story, there was a poem. So it was a poem about the story. And he came home, Dad, got the solution. And I was like, okay, so this is an alternative version of ChatGPT. He asked the system to provide him with a solution to his problem, and he got the solution. So that's what I think is going to be more and more applicable as well, that young people have all the information is out there, and they have just the need to learn how to retrieve it, like your brain bomb app. If you need something at a certain time, you're going to schedule that information at a certain time and you'll get it. But this was kind of a different approach where he found a way to get the information without actually searching for it. And that's one of the things that I've noticed that a lot more kids are learning to do, is to get around the systems that they ask you to do something, but they get around it and fix it by using technology. And so that kind of is like different than what we're used to do. We were able to look up on Google. I got this error message on my computer. What's the solution? And you get to go through all these blogs and all these wonderful things. But now these days, their world is changing so much in a different direction on where they collect information and if they even need to bypass that information. So I think what you're doing with the app also has merit for younger people, where they more easily get the information directly, so they don't have to go around the system and find another way of getting that solution, which is also another approach.
I think it's important to distinguish information from thinking and decision making. That's a subtle
Mm.
but important point. Now, throughout history, we've used technology to make our jobs easier. Instead of picking crops by hand, we
Mhm.
started using tools, and then we started to automate those tools with the Industrial Revolution. And now one person can more efficiently cover entire fields using these great tools. And we go, great. humans can do better things and sit there and pick individual crops. And we're trying to automate as
Mhm.
much as possible in all sorts of fields. Now, it's true that we have information available at our fingertips. When
Mhm.
we were kids, it was look something up in the book, and maybe you had an encyclopedia at home, maybe you had to go to the library to get it.
Mhm.
Maybe you couldn't find something, you had to look through multiple books. But now, of course, we have everything on the internet. I can find a piece of knowledge in seconds.
Mhm.
How much does the heart of an elephant weigh? I can find that in 20 seconds.
True.
And so
Yeah.
that's great because flipping through books to find it was very inefficient. And
Mhm.
the equivalent as adults, if you're a lawyer and you're saying, I need to find a certain precedent, again, instead of reading through hundreds of cases, if you can find it more quickly, software engineers go to Stack Overflow, find that error code. Great.
Yeah.
Okay, this is what you need to know. So it saved us a lot of rote time. But and we will continue to remove road time. I remember as a software developer in the early days, I had to deal with all these file handles. Find the file, open the file, track where you are in the file, close the file. More modern languages say, "Hey, we'll take care of that for you." Other
Yeah.
things like logging, so writing logs for your software, or user management. Hey, you need to be able to reset a password. This is not high value. Every system needs it. Why should we waste a developer's time doing it? We get off the shelf solutions because that now comes as part of a library or a third party tool. So
Mhm.
great,
Mhm.
we avoid that rote work. But then what do we do with that free time? It's that, okay, now you can think through what is the way to deliver real value to your customers because it's not password reset. Yes, they need that because can't reset their password, doesn't work. But the real
Mhm.
value isn't password reset. It's taking this data, analyzing in this way, and providing some information to them. If you're a lawyer, the value wasn't, oh, you found this precedent. The lawyer, the value you provide to your clients, it's here is the strategy we're going to take for this legal matter. And part of that strategy requires I find precedents, and that's the rote work. And so, what we always try to do is remove more of the rote tasks to free up people to focus on the higher order thinking and value creation. Now, kids often just want the quickest, easiest, fastest way. They're not thinking of the higher order piece. And there's something to be said to, hey, if you can be clever and find a quick way to solve this, good,
Yeah.
that's a useful skill. But we also want to balance that with teaching them what's the higher order lesson here? What's the meta lesson? In fact,
Mhm.
one of the mistakes that I think comes out of certainly at the college level and even high school level is we never talk about the meta lessons in each of the classes. It's not about whether you remember the exact dates of the Roman Empire and which particular ruler came after which one. You
Mhm.
can look that up. But do you see the patterns? Do you see how society evolved? What the flaws were that grew over time that led to the downfall? If you can understand that, now you have not information, but knowledge and understanding that you can apply to other situations. And that's what we need to be emphasizing in education, particularly for older students.
Mhm. Yeah, I like the idea what you're saying about the meta lesson because I see a lot of trainings. Let's take for instance a time management training. They throw around with all these terminologies of eat the frog and um, big rocks and small rocks and sand. And Stephen Covey loved that one. I still use it in my trainings because it's very visible. Um, but what's the major idea of, for instance, a time management training is uh, what I had as an opinion at some point was like time is not manageable. The only thing that you can do is compartment time for specific things that you do. So the only thing that you can do is prioritize. Nothing to do with time management. It's like you can manage money because that's a physical thing, then it's a number thing, but time, it's out there, and if something goes wrong, I don't know, your coffee maker blows up, you have to run for the fire extinguisher. It's something that you cannot plan. It's something that happens. So you set your priority and put out the fire.
That's a great way to look at it. By the way, this is where my physics training comes in. And it's not that, oh, let's use my knowledge of quarks. One of the things you learn to do in physics is rotate your coordinate space. And that's what you've done here. You said instead of looking at as time management, rotate that to priority management. It's a
Mhm.
different way of looking at it. And in physics, we know by rotating to a different coordinate space, a problem gets easier or possibly harder if you did to the wrong one. And
Yeah.
so that's what you're saying here is if you're looking at time management struggling, look at as priority management, and that might be a more tractable problem. It might be easier for you to parse out or work with. And so
Mhm.
that's a great example.
Yeah. So, what are the things that you found in your career up until now that were the biggest struggles that you found in your leadership role? Because I think that's what a lot of people always like to know of people that have gone somewhere and then found out.
My probably biggest challenge throughout my career was dealing with corporate politics
Okay.
because I rose through the ranks thinking, well, I can do a good job. I'm going to
Hmm.
focus on doing a good job. And as long as I do a good job, I am creating value for the company, for the clients, and that's what gets rewarded. I didn't realize there's a whole different system. And I was lucky to get a wonderful book, Survival of the Savvy. I referenced that in my book. In fact, I reached out to the authors. I said, I want to basically almost quote you for about a page and a half. And I want to make sure I have the permission. That's more than a fair use quote. Got their
Indeed.
permission. I talk about their model, about their spectrum from over political to under political. I think it's a wonderful framework. And they
Yeah.
really taught me that while I might be focused on under political, just let the results speak for themselves. That's not how everyone is wired. And so,
Mhm.
just like we talked about, for some bosses, you need to send the email. For others, you need to go into her office.
Mhm.
Likewise, for some bosses, they just care about what's the end product. For others, it's the delivery as well and making sure they're aware of what you did and how you did it. And getting that recognition actually matters. It goes into how they process their own reward system effectively, who gets promoted, who gets on another project, who gets
Mhm.
terminated. The key is either of these taken to the extreme. We think about the extreme case of, oh, they're just promoting the people who kiss up to them. That's an extreme case, and we don't like
Yeah.
that.
Mhm.
But towards the center, some people can be a little more relationship oriented, others a little less relationship oriented. And I came from that very less relationship oriented side. So I
Mhm.
wasn't seeing how they looked at the challenge and that these relationships did matter. And
Mhm.
once I shifted to understand that, I could then engage in a way that mattered to the CEO, to my
Mhm.
boss, and that helped me gain success in later companies. So that was a big struggle for me. But really for anyone, whether it is corporate politics or these other skills we talked about, this is why I noted in my book, it begins with a mental shift. Because when you look at the problem a different way, whether it's moving from time management to priority management,
Mhm.
whether it's looking at networking is a tool to get me a job, to networking is a set of people who can provide me insights and information, all of a sudden you see it in a different way and it can solve different problems, making some of your current problems much easier. So that mental shift towards these skills, that's what's so important. Even more important than the concrete actionable things you can do. Because once you look at it the right way, problems get much easier.
Yeah, that's a beautiful vision, and I understand what you mean by your experience in corporate politics. I've been there as well, where I was a technician at the start of my career, and I did some amazing things, if I say so myself. Where the point came that I was actually training the other technicians on how to do the job, and I was amazingly good at training them. But I was also good at leading them out of a natural sense of leadership, without pushing or pulling or whatever. I always bring up the image of the managers on the cart and the leaders in front of the horses or between the horses pulling the cart. And once the cart's rolling, I crawl on to the cart and manage if it can keep on rolling. And that's what I used to do. But I was hitting a wall because the people that were officially titled manager were not happy, because they were kind of jealous that I had more influence on their employees than they did. So corporate politics, or even SMB politics, even there, it also exists. Absolutely. So yeah, I think there's a couple of really great things that we've discussed during our conversation here. And I think for the listeners, even though most of the people that listen to this podcast are already of a certain age and a certain experience, I think it might be interesting to understand how their team members might benefit of these changes in perspective by reading your book and getting that information from a different point of view.
What started me on this path, when I wanted to develop these skills in myself, I quickly realized these skills are for everyone, not just C-suite leaders. When you think about, well, I'm the owner of the company, I have to network to find clients, to find suppliers, to find people. What if everyone on your team could do that?
Mm-hmm.
You think, well, I need to be able to communicate this. I need good communication skills to lead people, to talk externally. I have to know how to communicate well. What if everyone on your team could communicate much more effectively with each other, with your clients, with your partners?
Mm-hmm.
So these skills, if you can get people just 1 or 2% better, you're going to see this compounding effect across your company. So absolutely, even if you feel I've got these skills, ask,
Mm-hmm.
does everyone in your company have them? And if not, it's time to go and develop them. And now on my website, and we'll give you that in a moment, on the resources page, the very first download, completely free, I don't even gate it with an email, is how to create a learning program, a no cost learning program within your organization. Now, you can use my book if you want. A breakdown, here's how to use my book to teach different skills. If
Mm-hmm.
you don't want to use my book, you can use other sources, other books, podcasts, videos, other training material. But here is the framework for how to upskill your entire organization, all for free.
That's a lot of gifts going out into the world that you're providing. And I wanna thank you for the biggest gift that you gave me as a person. That's your time, because we don't that's limited. Thank you very much for our conversation today. And I've got one more question. Except for the book and the app, where can people find you, and what else can they reach out to you for?
I'm going to give you a couple websites. The Brain Bump app we talked about, which is completely free, you can get in the
Mhm.
app stores, or go to brainbumpapp.com. And on that website are links to the stores. There's a 90-second video showing how it works, FAQ instructions. All of that is at brainbumpapp.com. My book's website is thecareertoolkitbook.com. You can learn more about the book, where to buy it, get in touch with me, follow me on social media. And we have a number of free resources, including that download I mentioned for how to use this as a training program, again, completely free. I have a third website we didn't talk about much called Cognosco Media, Cognosco Media. And on that website, cognoscomedia.com, I write about the future of media. Brain Bump is one example. I write about other things happening in the media world. I also have a whole sub-series on podcasting called Podcast Alchemy. So all
Mhm.
that's on the third website. And then for my professional work, where I'm a CTO, CPO, I advise companies on technology, AI, cybersecurity. You can see that on LinkedIn. And so if you just Google my name on LinkedIn, or linkedin.com/in/Hershey, HERSHEY, you can find me, learn about that. And you can reach out to me on any of these websites or my LinkedIn. So brainbumpapp.com, thecareertoolkitbook.com, and cognoscomedia.com.
Wow, that's a lot of project you've got running there, Mark.
Keeps me
I know
busy.
which one I'm going to consult already. So thank you very much for joining us today and giving us so much value and so much insight on your book. And I hope a lot of the listeners will reach out to get your book or the resources that are available. So for our listeners, check out my website as well, nicovandevenne.com, for our newest ebook. And remember to jump from head to heart and feel the beat within. Have a good one, everybody. Bye bye.
Thank you for listening to the Everlasting Podcast. Let me leave you with a few questions to answer in the comments. How do you see the different topics we discussed during this interview? What are your thoughts? What stood out for you? Let us know in the comments or just send us your feedback. We launch new episodes weekly. Don't miss any by ensuring you are subscribed to the show. Click the follow button now. We depend on the organic growth of the podcast to inspire more and more people. So by giving us a 5-star review and sharing this episode with at least one of your friends who might be interested in the subject, you will significantly help more people become inspired. But more than anything, I am grateful to you for taking the time to listen to the show. If you are also a successful CEO, founder, or entrepreneur who has inspiring words to say, feel free to contact us for an interview at contact@nicovandevenne.com. Thank you for listening. We will see you again soon with more inspirational conversations on achieving everlasting fulfillment.